There you go. Hi.
I'm saying, I hear you're freezing cold that side.
So cold.
We did it.
Because it's very hot this side.
Oh,
It's hot.
very.
Very
Oh
hot.
yeah, it's very
Very
hot.
hot.
Yeah.
Yesterday we did not have school because there's too much snow.
I know we were supposed to have a call with the third grade,
Oh,
so we
yeah,
had to
yeah,
cancel
yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So I know it's a little hard, but if
Oh, right.
Oh, yeah.
we're
Sorry,
looking at the
look
camera, but I know it's a little hard that way. But all right. So just go ahead. Are you ready to start?
Yeah, we're
Okay. Just reintroduce yourself.
I'm Mackenzie, and I'm going to be talking to you for the session today. I teach second grade with Betsy.
Hi, I'm Betsy. I teach second grade.
Thank you. Joseph is mine. Joseph.
Standard 8.
I teach Saturday 8 and 7.
Good morning.
This is Ikarama. I teach grade 1. It is standard 2.
Standard 2.
Joyce Murray. I teach standard 4.
Nelson Bana, standard 3. Hi. Simon, standard 7. Hi, Christy, standard 6 teacher. Hi, Arnold, standard 5 teacher.
I'm Elisa, standard 1 teacher.
Hi.
Good morning.
We have some of the assistants in the back.
Okay, this is just coming in. You can introduce yourself.
Hi. Nice to meet you.
Hi.
You
So,
hear that?
no, I didn't, but I can tell them. So Ruth is our preschool. So she's training to be a preschool teacher. So she's at the school now doing that.
Cool.
So she was one of our kids.
Yeah, good.
Yep. Great.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good afternoon.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Well, I can just get started, and if at any point you would like me to stop and ask a question, just let me know. The goal for today's session was to build off of what we talked about last time. So last time we talked about how people as human beings have different learning styles. Some of us learn things better in a certain way than other people. So today we'll review those 3 learning styles again, but we'll also talk about what we actually do with that information. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Little different.
Okay, so last time we talked about how we have auditory learners, kinesthetic learners, and visual learners. The first step is we need to make sure we understand what those 3 learning styles are. And last time, Betsy and Lily talked about different activities that you could do with your students to explore those learning styles. Did anybody do that activity?
Maybe they could show. They're going to share.
Does anybody want to share how it went or what they learned?
Nope.
Hannah will make somebody share. Nelson.
Okay, I'm Nelson, standard 3 teacher. Yes, I tried it in my class, and yeah, it was wonderful because the learners were so much interested to experience what we were doing in the class. First, when you putting them into groups where they can be able to show up how they learn. So this was an interesting activity. However, I had some children who are very slow, so they were somehow delayed in order to catch up when we were shifting across the groups where we would be understanding their learning styles. So those fast learners are able to catch up and pick as possible. But for the slow learners, you could be waiting for maybe to finish up what they were. So maybe that was the only challenge that I had, but all in all, it was wonderful.
So some people were too slow to go through the stations all the way. Yes. We had that as well. We did.
Mhm.
Does anybody else want to share?
Did they figure out what kind of learners they were through
And sometimes it's hard, especially when you have one thing that you're going to learn about. Like when we did this station, we were just talking about trees. And so some people could clearly decide from that station, okay, I liked listening about trees. But for some students, it was harder to pick one, and that's okay. Did you have any students who kind of figured out what learning style they liked best?
Yeah, and then I see some of the children like the learning style whereby they were too much involved with their bodies when they were learning. So because they used some exercises and other things, they were able to move around and do some activities in the class. To them, it was an interesting activity, and I also noted that using that one, it was easy for them to remember or recall what they have been doing, even when the activity has ended. Yeah, so that was how I experienced.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. Thank you. Should we move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about what the different learning styles were. And last time I think somebody asked kind of what do we do with that information once we know it? So first I wanted to kind of recap why it's important to know that. And one of the first things that we know about human beings and people in general is that when you can stimulate your brain or activate your thinking in more than one way, you're going to learn better. And so instead of just standing up there and saying what you want people to know, we need to give people more ways to kind of capture their interest or more ways to activate their brain. If we do that and we use more of the learning styles, then the students will be less bored. They will stay engaged more for a longer period of time, which also helps with students misbehaving. Who notices that when your student is bored, they might act out a little bit more? Has anybody seen that? Yeah. So, and then the other reason why it's really important that we think about all of these different things is that it helps students understand who they are as a learner more and start to advocate for themselves. So we know that you have your students in your classroom for maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, depending on their situation. But if they are able to advocate for themselves, it doesn't matter as much who their teacher is because they can ask for what they need to learn. They can say, last year when I was with Ruth, I knew I liked to stand up and move my body. Can I move my body in your classroom as well? And that will help them. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, I have a question before we proceed.
Yes.
Just to pick from what they're so to share in. He said that most of his students in the class like the kinetic style. Now, I'm just wondering, is it like, should I assume that most of the lower class learners, use the kinesthetic style for learning, or it just happened like in lessons class? Because that's what I feel. I don't know. What do you think?
Is it just for
So he's
her?
wondering if it's like, is it mostly the lower learners that are going to like the kinesthetic? He also, Nelson has almost, I think he has all boys and one girl in his class. So
Okay.
is that like, what are the trends in that?
Yeah.
That'd be the question.
So, one thing with younger students, I think we can disguise learning in different ways. We can play games and they get excited. It's kind of like tricking them a little bit, right? You can have them move and play a game and you know that they're learning. Whereas with the older students, they might roll their eyes a little bit or be like, what are we doing right now? But later in this session, I'll talk about how incorporating movement throughout all of your lessons just gives them a mental break and helps re-engage their brain. So even if the movement isn't necessarily for the learning, if you have a movement break, that helps them focus when they're listening or writing or reading.
So to follow up on Hannah's question, would you say that that's for all grades, not just lower grades?
Yes.
Okay. And not just for boys, it's also for girls.
Yes.
So you noticed that the benefit for all. Okay. Does that answer the question, Hannah?
But you might want to address that as all boys.
Simon has a question.
I just wanted to comment on Henry's question. Not only with the younger kids, I handle the older kids, but they also enjoy the kinesthetic style. In the face-to-face, they had to draw the vertebrae with different, the backbones of different animals. So they enjoy the drawing. And again, taking mathematics, they don't enjoy watching the teacher solving on the board, but enjoy doing it themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So I heard you say that even with the older students, they don't enjoy just watching you. They like to also do it. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they were
Yes.
they were drawing.
Yeah. And I think I noticed in some pictures that Karen brought back, some of the classrooms have whiteboards.
The younger
chalkboards,
they have
the younger
chalkboards.
ones?
The younger ones have some whiteboards. Yeah.
So that's one way that, or even just a pen and paper. If all of the students have a way to be doing something as you are teaching, to do it along with you, that helps them. So I actually brought a whiteboard today that I will do with you to show that. But you're right, we don't want to just stand up here and talk the whole time. We want the students to do something too. And I can talk about that a little bit. I'm going to move on because I think what I'm going to say next will address both of those things. Is that okay? Okay. So knowing what we know, lots of students have different learning styles. Realistically, we cannot plan 20 different lessons for 20 different students in our class. We know you have large classes and sometimes your classes are combined. That's just not possible. So what we need to do whenever we plan is incorporate all of the learning styles into each lesson for all of the students. That's also important because one student might say, I'm a kinesthetic learner. I like to learn when I move, but that doesn't mean they can't learn by listening. It doesn't mean they can't learn by looking at something. So we want to do all of it at once. Does that make sense? So I have two examples of how we would want to do that. One example is when we're learning new vocabulary, kind of like the 3 learning styles. So we had kinesthetic. So if I were going to teach my students, I would say the word out loud. We're going to learn about the kinesthetic learning style. I might have you repeat it. Can you repeat that word? Good job. Then I would write it. And I might, when I write it, I might want to draw a diagram that goes with it. If this is about the body moving, maybe I can find a way to draw a person. So now you have heard me say it, you've repeated it back, you see it with a visual, and now I might ask you to do something with your body. If I say kinesthetic, let's pretend to run. Can you pretend to run?
I'll run with you.
Thank you. So then we could have the students repeat it. Kinesthetic, you run.
Kinesthetic.
You run.
Thank you. Good.
We'll help you.
The next learning style I want to teach you is auditory. Auditory is when you hear. So I would say auditory. What's the word?
Auditory.
Good. And I would write it, maybe on the board, and I might even draw another picture. This time I'm going to draw an ear. And my drawing doesn't have to be perfect, but I just want you to see it. And so I would say, auditory, let's touch our ear. Can you say it? And then the last one is visual. Visual, I would write it. Maybe I want to draw a picture again. Show it to you. And let's all say visual with our eye.
Visual.
So now you've heard me say it, you've seen it, and you've done something with your body. We could even play a game where I say the word and I have you do the body movement to show me you understand. So if I say kinesthetic, what would you do with your body? If I say visual, what would you do with your body? If I say auditory, what would you do? So do you see how I incorporated all three? And that's something that you can do with older students, younger students, with all of your students. And it doesn't matter what kind of a learner they are. What questions do you have? Any?
Just a moment. Really, what you have explained is really true, because also I was just looking at a point when the teacher is trying to give some instructions to the learners. At that period of time, the learners listen in order to catch whatever the teacher is saying or telling them to do. So that can be also another method, another way of this auditory type of learning. They are catching up to what the teacher is telling them to do. Once they hear it, now and they see the teacher has something to demonstrate, that means they will see how the teacher is doing that. And last of all, it will come to the kinesthetic, whereby they themselves work out what the teacher has explained to them. So this really means that all the learning styles has been incorporated into one lesson. That's great.
You got to
Yeah.
finish
Yeah.
explaining.
Yeah.
Great.
Good job.
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, my comment on the aesthetic style, that one is good, because once a learner has taken part in an activity, in a lesson, she or he doesn't forget. So it assists the learner to be what we call in his mind, that I do something.
Yes. And you're touching on an important part. If I say something to you one time, you might remember, you might not. there's a lot of research that says you need to hear something at least 3 times for you to learn it. And so if I do it all 3 of these ways, you watch me do it, we do it together, and then you do it on your own, you just did that new concept 6 times, 9 times. So you get a lot of repetition. Was there another comment?
I think Arnold's gonna have
Can
to
you
come
say
a little
it louder?
closer. Yeah.
Okay, this style of
Arnold, you're gonna have to be much louder, please. Real loud.
Okay, I'm saying, in Malawi, we have a group of languages. So that language is English. We have to teach the different ways. So if we use only one style like audio or only visual, it doesn't work. But if you use all the styles like aesthetic and audio as well as visual, that's where the learners plan the people of the work. So it helps so much to us because the language teaching becomes a little bit easy.
Yeah, because they're also translating it into Chichewa. The kids are reprocessing it in their own language too. Yeah, so that throws a whole other piece.
That's a really good point, especially when you're going back and forth between 2 different languages. Auditory is really difficult. I know that I have a hard time when I learn a new language just because I have to spend so much time to figure out what I'm hearing and what that means. So if I see it and I do it as well, it all helps. Yeah. And so we can do what I just showed you with anything. My second example that I showed was maybe if you're learning how to say a new word, you're learning a new vocabulary word. If you first say the word out loud so the students can hear it, then you write it. You might draw a visual or write the definition as well. And then you can have the students do it in some way. Maybe they take their 2 fingers and they spell it on the ground. Maybe they spell it with their hands in the air. But if they move their body in some way, all of that is activating their brain, which is helpful. The next page in your packet, this one, has all 3 learning styles, and I just tried to include a bunch of different strategies that you could do for them. And so I'll go through some of the things that I think are most important right now, and we can stop and talk about any of them if you have questions. So one of the things that's really important for auditory learners is they learn through conversation, not just hearing, but in being able to talk about something. So one of the easiest ways that you can help those learners is by giving them opportunities to talk. We use partnerships in our classrooms a lot. So our students might have partners for math. They might have partners for reading or writing. And at any point in the lesson, you can say, turn and talk to your partner. So if I was explaining the learning styles and Betsy was my partner, after I did that first kinesthetic, I might have them turn and repeat the definition that I just said to them to my partner. Then Betsy could repeat it back to me. And we know that if you can explain something to somebody else, that means you learned it a little bit more. Does that make sense?
I wonder, is it something they could use?
Have you used partnerships in any of your teaching before? And if so, does anybody want to talk about how that has gone for them?
Did we freeze?
He was
A
talking.
lot of their desks are too, aren't they?
It's where of
Can you? We can't hear you.
It's thunder. It's Okay.
I'll say we have done partnering.
Oh, shoot.
The connection's not good right now. You may have to come again, Nelson.
It's just this.
We have been using this partnering style
Oh, okay.
in teaching our lessons in class. For example, if we are teaching English language, and we want to practice some words using their way, so that the children can be.
It was so good.
So,
Should we tell him it's cutting?
how that action is done. For example, when we are talking about the word, we teach the children
How to pronounce the word.
Oh,
Shoot.
so when we ask people writing, now they are able to
yeah.
realize the real action that can be described.
We're just gonna have to move on once he's done.
Yeah.
Let's see if it comes back.
So that the partner is doing it the right way. When the partner does not do it the right way, the partner also helps the partner
Yeah.
to do it the right way. Yeah, that's how we also do them when teaching the language.
Yes. That's excellent. And another thing that auditory learners, can you hear me?
Yeah, I
Oh, it wants to give.
Musical chairs.
For example, I can ask my friend, what is your name? My name is no, it's what name? What is your name? My name is Teresa. Now it goes like that.
That's what she does in her class in the standard one. Yeah.
Yes.
They practice that a lot. She uses that a lot in standard
That's right.
one. Yeah.
That's great. Great. Another thing that you can do for auditory learners, especially when learning new vocabulary or even just reading, is what we call choral reading, where everybody does it together. So you might read a passage or a poem. Is that something you already do? Yes.
Yeah.
So I think auditory learners, that's one of the things that makes a lot of sense to us because we do it naturally. We're social human beings. We like to communicate. And so it makes sense that we would learn in that way. Visual learners, that's where you can have a lot of different things to help visual learners. Of course, you can draw and show them a picture. But oftentimes, I know I personally forget to do things like label it. And so it's one thing to draw a picture, but as many visual cues as you can give a learner, the better. So labels are really important. Color coding is actually, there's a lot of research on color coding and how that helps learners. So if you're going to be teaching more than one concept in a lesson, maybe one important part is going to be in one color or in one section of your board. One important part would be in another color or another section of the board. And it just gives our eyes a visual cue to separate these and to focus them at different times. Yeah. Oh, we should get a
Ask
chalk.
them. Yeah, ask if they have that.
We know you use chalk on the chalkboards. Do you have colored chalk or is it all white?
I don't know. Is it white or all colored or colored?
We have white, but we also have the color dots. So
Sometimes.
sometimes
So, can you, Hanak, is colored chalk something you can get easily?
yeah, we have it. And I think what I noticed, is white. But we have all the colors.
You have all the colors. Okay. All right. So that's good.
That's just a really helpful visual reminder for kids that's easy to forget about. And once your students see you do it, it's also a strategy they can use in their own learning. So if they are doing something, if they're working through a problem, maybe they want to do one step in one color to remind themselves, this is the first thing I do. This is where I'm going to go. And then another color for another part. Or in our writing, when we ask our students to go back and edit or revise their writing, sometimes using a different color is really helpful for them because it's a visual reminder. This is new and this is a change I'm making. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's very important. I just wanted to comment on that. We have lots of pencils here, which we can use. I think as you write the book, I feel like it's high time that we ask teachers to encourage chalk, encourage pencils, but it helps them remind concepts. I like what you said. For example, maybe you are doing mathematics, so like part 1 you use a different color, part 2 you use a different color. So that helps the children separate the concepts in their minds.
Yes.
So yeah, I think
So it's constantly reinforcing the most important things. We also use different colors in math when they make their corrections. So we might hand them back something, and if we want them to take another look at a problem or correct it, we have them do it in a different color. And sometimes that also emphasizes it's okay to make mistakes. That's when you learn. So at first, a lot of our students would want to erase and just have the correct answer on their page. But if they get in the habit of seeing the process in different colors, they know I'm learning right now. It's okay to make mistakes. I can keep going. The other thing for visual learners is when you have like a key word. So for example, if we're teaching a new sound, like one of the sounds we teach in 2nd grade spelling is ost, and it's spelled O-S-T. So we teach the kids the key word post. So O-S-T, post, ost, and then we show them a picture of a post. So they can hold that picture in their brain to help them remember that sound. So anytime you can give them a word or a picture that goes with a concept, it helps your learners. And you can read the other strategies for visual learners, but I think those are some of the most important. So we can go on to kinesthetic. And kinesthetic is one that we talked a lot about at the beginning. Does it just have to be you're moving your body to learn, or can it just be as simple as a movement break throughout your lesson? And we know that as human beings, our brains are activated by movement. If you think about it, long time ago, when we were first developing as a species, people were constantly on the move. Nobody really sat still to think. So we need to move to get our brains to go. So one thing that you can do is find ways to have your wiggly students move throughout a lesson. I know that we talked about how if you're 8 years old, you can pay attention for 8 minutes. And that's kind of shocking. That's not a long time to sit still and listen. But if you're sitting, you can teach them strategies. They could take their hands and twiddle their thumbs. That could just be something that they do in their lap and nobody notices, but they're moving their body in some way. Or they could like pinch their fingers and just feel the pressure. Those are things that you can teach your kids who are constantly wiggling and moving and might be distracting to other people so that they can do it while you teach. Do you have any students who need to move a lot while you teach? Probably.
Yeah. I can name them all in the classes. I know. It's a bunch of chewing pencils. That's what I notice that a lot.
Or
That's an
any
example.
fidgets. And I think it's important to know that that's okay. People need to move. If they tap their foot or jiggle their knee, that's okay, as long as it's not distracting other kids. So you can give them the tools to do it in a way that helps them and doesn't take away from other learners. Also, allowing students to try things first and see how it works before you necessarily teach things. Kinesthetic learners like to experiment. They like to do things and go through that process. So you might not always start your lesson where you teach something. Sometimes you might want to give them the opportunity to just explore something, to explore materials or try to put something together and see what happens.
Can you talk about the manipulatives?
Yeah.
That's a big one.
So on the list, I said use manipulatives. And that's a word that we use to talk about objects that could help. I should have brought
They
some.
use stones for math.
So Betsy said you use stones for math, like stones or pebbles to help them count. Yes. That would be a manipulative. So if you show them something, having them move their body to put things in a certain way or to add things or take away, that really helps your kinesthetic learners.
There, in Hannock, you have all the counting blocks from Brenda Robinson from this summer. So she was a math teacher at a school in California. She sent a lot of other math manipulatives.
Yeah.
And the good example I was thinking too is for Joyce, when you were having your class make abacus for thousands, hundreds, tens, and ones. So they were making them. They were making their own stones to count. So or their own pieces to put on. It was a good example.
And that's one of the most important things is anytime you can have the students create the manipulative and take ownership over that is better. Because then you're not just handing them something to use, but they're building it. They understand how it works and they understand how it can help them as a tool. Can you think of any other manipulatives that you use?
I saw a wire thing with metal pieces, Karen, where they counted with that. Did you see that?
Yes, I haven't seen that late. Simon made that. Yeah, we lost it. Are you back on? Can you hear us? Yeah. Oh, she's explaining. Okay. Okay. He was just explaining. Okay. Keep going.
Should I move on?
So we probably have 10 minutes
Okay.
for you guys to be back.
So you can look through that and explore any of the other options. The last thing at the bottom of the paper that I mentioned was something we call the gradual release model. And so you're gradually releasing the students to do something. And part of that model is I do first. So I'm going to show you, I'm going to teach you. Then as a group, we all do it together. And then you go and do it. So I do, we do, you do. And that helps repeat, and it also helps you use the different learning styles in more than one way. Does that make sense? Great. The last thing that we put that I wanted you to think about is how you can set up your classroom for all of the different types of learners, especially for those of you who are sharing classrooms.
They're not sharing.
Oh, they're
They're
not.
also, everybody's in their own now.
Oh, never mind.
Yeah. But keep going.
But what spaces do you have in your classroom for students to move to and do different things? For example, is there a section of your classroom where the students know if they want to go talk to somebody about something and work together, that's where they can go talk? Because that could be distracting to somebody who wants to just focus on their own thing. So if you have a section in the classroom where they can go talk, that's good. Or do you have a section in your classroom where maybe somebody can stand up and do their work while standing? Have you thought about how you can organize your classroom to have different learners in it?
Let me just clarify that.
Am I talking too fast?
No. I think sometimes he then adds his own thing.
Like what?
Yeah, which is good. And Nelson, I think Nelson has to. So I think he kind of may explain that one section like in that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great.
So it's helpful to send it before.
So,
they both,
yeah, that
right?
was awesome. We need to do it.
Have it?
We need to do it every time. Like,
You guys here? Oh, you guys here. This is gonna be my last one, BTW.
Yeah, so I think in that agreement, but it's happening and that's what we are moving to. That's what we want to do at the end of the day.
Yeah. Has anybody tried something that maybe went well or didn't go well?
Yeah. For instance, during examination, when we are given the tests, it happens that because they are in groups, now when we are starting writing the exams, some learners they choose to be at their sides so that they can be writing on their own. They do so.
That's great.
During tests, yeah.
Yeah. That's good. Any other examples? Those were the most important. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, in a class, when we are learning mathematics, and give the exercise, then after maybe they copy one or two of the problems, then they go aside. And using the counters, they can solve that problem on a side to solve the problem. They can go at a certain point place in the same class to solve the problem.
Yes, it
Or
is.
sometimes maybe it is time for reading. They can take their own books they want and read at a certain place. Thank you.
That's
Yeah,
great.
and that's in the standard two. It's pretty open.
It's
She's
pretty
really
open,
good.
so they can move around.
move around a lot in the standard two.
That's great. Well, before we move on, do you have any questions? Or I'm done. No.
Okay. My question is, you were saying that learning can take place even if you can allow learners to be moving. Now, for instance, one learner is moving, others have just sat. Now, you mean that learning can take place there properly while others are moving around and others have just sit at one place? Is it possible learning can take place properly there?
Is it possible to what?
So that some people could be moving and some could be sitting.
Yeah.
You know, like that. Yeah.
I think that what we try to do is we try to start our lessons where there's like 10 minutes of teaching, where we as the teacher are at the front of the classroom leading the students through some sort of activity, whether it's kind of what you and I did at the beginning. After that, they go off and practice that skill on their own in different ways. So that would be the time where maybe some students are sitting and reading about it, some students are working together in a group, and you want to give all of the students opportunities to do all of the things. Because in life, you have to be able to move and try things out. You also have to be able to sit and listen to people. You also have to be able to read about it. So we want them to do all of them. Does that make sense? Yeah.
I thought it was interesting too. This year.
And that was a very profound question because teachers, we want to have uniformity, like all the kids doing the same
Yeah,
thing.
see, that's this.
You feel like get interrupted when somebody is doing something different. Not knowing that that's his or her living style. So I'm happy that she's just doing that.
Yeah. And that's something you'll notice that I wrote, especially auditory learners. It might be really hard for them to learn if the classroom is too quiet or too loud. And so having the students understand that, sometimes I will say, okay, for 5 minutes, we're all going to work silently. We're not going to talk, because I want to give everybody that chance to be in a calm, quiet environment. Then after the 5 minutes, people can talk and move around. So you want to build in different sections or different time in your lesson.
What?
Okay, I'm just going to share my experience. With my class, I have a child who most of the times they're given some way to do, whether it's English exercise or it's maths. He climbs on the chair with the feet and then stand there and write on the desk. Is that advisor?
So is he banging his chair, banging the desk?
Not banging, but I should say, whether squatting on the chair or putting the feet on the chair or kneeling on the chair.
Yeah. So he's wiggling his chair. Okay, yeah.
So he's
Yeah,
wiggling.
because they want.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's okay.
So, yes, that's okay. I think you always have to go back to, is it distracting his learning? Is it distracting other students' learning? If it is distracting to him, then that's not an option. Maybe you tap your foot. Maybe you stand up. And just have that conversation with him. If you see him doing something and he's very focused and very engaged, that's fine. That's okay. As long as it's not taking away from his learning and their learning.
If it is bothering somebody else in the classroom, could you just move them to a different location where they could be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally.
Does that answer the question, Nelson?
Yeah.
But I noticed something from the other children, because they actually are used to let people in class. When somebody is doing something different, they always report. Also, the rest of the report, so they describe. They say, look at this one, is doing different from what they do.
Yeah.
So that again distracts the lesson and the learning process.
So he's saying the kids are reporting on each other doing something different because they're used to all having to do the same, so they're
Yeah.
gonna have to teach them.
Yeah.
It's okay.
I think that's a conversation that we have all the time and you have to have with your students. Just reminding them we are all different. We are all different learners and we need different things. Karen might need one thing and I need another thing, and that's okay. And then during the lessons, you might have time where everybody does something and you say, right now as a class, we are all doing this together. Once we move on from that, you can have choices, and that's okay. It's something that the kids will probably push back on a lot. And you just have to keep reminding them we are all different and we all need different things.
And it goes back to advocating for yourself.
Yeah, and Karen brought up, it goes back to advocating for yourself. Giving students the language to say, I can't focus unless I'm moving, or I need this to do my best learning. And if they can say it in those words, it will help students to understand they're not trying to be bad, that's just who they are as a learner.
Is there anything else? We probably have to wrap up in a minute.
But thank you. It was nice to see you all again.
This may be your last time to see Mackenzie because she'll be going out on maternity leave very soon.
Talking.
Oh, go ahead.
Again?
I said this may be your last time this year to see Mackenzie. She's going out on maternity leave soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Karen.
All right. I'll see you guys all soon. Bye. I miss you. Anyway, I'm gonna end. I'll see you tomorrow. Yeah, we'll see you. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Bye. All right. We just had one blip, but it was their sound kind of got a little wonky, but we just kind of waited and let them talk through it, and it worked out.
Excellent.
Thank you. All right, so we're just going to set up the meetings every time because